Good afternoon now. It is 5:06 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL.
When more of this continues to unravel, it rises to the level of impeachment inquiry.
That's Kevin McCarthy this week, now saying that an impeachment inquiry very much on the table. For more on this, I want to turn to Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Green. She joins us on the phone right now. Congresswoman, great to have you with us today.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
What is going on in the United States House when it comes to an impeachment of Joe Biden? What can you tell us?
Well, I think it's, for everyone listening, it is an extremely big deal that you heard Speaker Kevin McCarthy talking about that the evidence that we have provided through our investigations on the Oversight Committee, also Ways and Means Committee, as well as testimony from witnesses and information that we've been able to uncover through subpoena work and the SARS reports we've read in the Treasury, that all of that together has risen to the level of an impeachment inquiry. That means that if we can get 218 votes on an impeachment inquiry, we open up an investigation, and that will give the House stronger subpoena power, meaning that we will not have Christopher Wray from the FBI denying us the ability to hold in our hand the unclassified 1023 form. That means that these agencies will have to comply with House in our investigation into whether we should proceed forward with impeachment. So this is a really big deal, and this means that you'll see over the next, probably the August recess, more information coming forward, such as the testimony from Devin Archer next week. He's expected to testify to oversight, as well as other Hunter Biden business partners. And we'll be bringing more information to prove, and this is the important piece, prove that Joe Biden is on record lying about his son Hunter Biden's business deals and what he knows. The question is, what does the president know and when did he know it? And we know for a fact that he's lied.
Congresswoman, how serious do you think Kevin McCarthy is about this? I noted earlier this week that he's saying that he's considering an impeachment inquiry. It sounds a little like what he said late last year about Alejandro Mayorkas, that he either resign or will think about impeaching you. Do you think that Kevin McCarthy is serious about this?
I think this is extremely serious. It's so serious that this morning at our GOP conference, the speaker stood up and addressed our entire conference about impeachment inquiry, and that he told everyone in the conference, when I come to you and I ask you for this, I expect you to be here for it. I expect you to be with me on this one. And that's what he told the entire conference. So I think it's very serious, and Speaker McCarthy would not be talking about it publicly nor addressing the conference about it if it wasn't something he was planning to go forward on.
Do you believe this is something that is imminent? You mentioned Devin Archer's testimony next week. That seems like it'll be pivotal. Will an impeachment inquiry begin soon?
I certainly hope so. I think the American people know that I've been demanding impeachment from day one.
Yes.
I introduced articles of impeachment on Joe Biden literally on his first day in office back in January of 2021 for the very evidence, for the very crimes that we're seeing the proof just unveiled for the American people for. Only we have far more proof than we had back then. Back then, we only had information and interviews that came from the Hunter Biden laptop, which is damning, which in my opinion is plenty of proof right there to impeach Joe Biden. But having actual information coming from an informant, an FBI informant, that the FBI says their top informant in the world, that they paid $200,000 to for the information that he provided, saying that the oligarch that owns Burisma, Zlochevsky, paid $5 million to then Vice President Joe Biden. That's a bribe in order for Joe Biden to make his problems go away. That's what he said, make his problems go away. And then
Yes.
we know that Joe Biden was going to withhold $1 billion in U.S. aid to get Victor Shokin fired. And sure enough, he got fired. And Joe Biden, the vice president of the United States at the time, bragged about it on camera. And that video has been shown over and over again. So with the information is there, the proof is there. We have the bank statement showing wire transfers from foreign nationals, foreign countries, foreign governments into fake shell LLC accounts, and then millions of dollars paid out to multiple Biden family members, including grandchildren. No, not the one that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden are denying, but their other grandchildren that they admit are theirs. But no, the evidence is there. It's damning. It's overwhelming. The American people support impeachment by over 53% with Republican, Independent, and Democrat voters.
Yes.
But it's time to get our conference there, and we can do that with an impeachment inquiry.
Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Green, I know that you're short on time, so I'll ask this final question of you. Hunter Biden's prostitutes. I know you are trying to dig in on the Justice Department and how it is handled the status of what appear to be multiple sex crimes apparently committed by Hunter Biden. What can you tell us?
Yes. Thank you for asking about that. This week, Chairman James Comer and I have sent a letter to two women, ironically. Miss Hillary Axsom, she is the National Human Trafficking Coordinator at the Department of Justice, and also to Miss Christina Rose. She's the Director at the Office for Victims of Crime at the Department of Justice. And we have many questions for them about the victims' rights. These victims are prostitutes that Hunter Biden trafficked across state lines. He paid for their airfare, paid them to engage in illegal activities, prostitution. He also recorded sex videos and then uploaded these videos himself to porn sites. All of this activity is extremely illegal, but we're very concerned about these women. We're very concerned about them as his victims and what their rights are. So we sent a letter inquiring about what rights they have. And then also the IRS whistleblowers provided information that not only did he engage in human sex trafficking, paying prostitutes, but he paid them through his law firm. And then he wrote off the expenses on his taxes. You know, most people write off business expenses like office supplies, like a business dinner or equipment they need to buy and purchase for their business. But Hunter Biden wrote off plane tickets, and payments to prostitutes as business expenses, which is extremely illegal. These IRS whistleblowers, these investigators were trying to bring charges against him for all of this, and they were stopped. They were completely blocked from doing it, which upset them so much so. And one of them is a self-admitted Democrat, still is a Democrat, supports his party, but he could not believe that the administration was protecting the president's son to this extent, even covering up these extensive, horrible crimes. So we'll be continuing to investigate these crimes, and we'll see where it takes us.
All right, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Green from Georgia. Thank you very much. Good to talk to you today.
Thank you so much. Great to talk to you, too.
It's great to have you here. So that's in very interesting details from the Congresswoman on what's happening behind the scenes as these Republicans mull over their strategy and their next steps. You heard her there emphasize that you have the House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, saying that he expects the Republican caucus to support him when the time comes. The moment that he calls for that impeachment inquiry to officially begin, his expectation is that they will be on his side. We're hearing stories today that there isn't much by way of defection going on among these Republicans. So it appears they, for the most part, are ready to stand in solidarity with him on this. Now the question becomes, what powers does an impeachment inquiry actually give these Republicans to break through the blockade of the Biden administration? Up until this point, the FBI has refused to make anything easy about digging in to Joe Biden's corrupt business dealings. And remember, I want to remind people, there's a lot of it's almost a mental trick. The way we talk about this story is often about Was Joe familiar with Hunter's business dealings? But at its core, the story isn't really about Hunter's business dealings. It never has been. It's always been about Joe. It's always been about Joe's business dealings. His son was the ne'er-do-well middleman for Joe's corruption. So it's about Joe's business dealings. And how much will the FBI allow us to see any of this? We know that a assistant U.S. attorney by the name of Leslie Wolf was allegedly responsible on multiple occasions for telling those IRS investigators that they couldn't dig into Dad. They couldn't dig in to the big guy. And in fact, you had the Justice Department alerting the Biden team when major investigative steps were about to take place with them, with their family. Congress has been stonewalled at every turn. It was pulling teeth to get one document out of the FBI, this FD 1023 form, which contained in it an allegation, a credible allegation that is supported by all sorts of contemporaneous evidence that Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, the Biden family, took bribes, as you heard Marjorie Taylor Green just lay out, in exchange for getting a prosecutor fired in Ukraine to take the heat off of Nikola Zlochevsky, the head of Burisma. That's the bribe. That's the allegation. And that was contained in the FD 1023 form by a very credible source. Margot Cleveland from The Federalist telling us earlier in this program, and if you missed it, check out the podcast, telling us earlier in this program that House investigators now know the identity of the confidential human source. They know who this person is. And everyone involved at this point has spoken to the credibility of this person. The FBI corroborating extensively the places, the locations, the dates that have been provided by that source. Well, then why didn't that go anywhere? And the answer seems abundantly clear. We're dealing with a very corrupt Justice Department. We're dealing with a corrupt federal government. And a lot of that got exposed today in a court proceeding in Delaware, which was supposed to result in Hunter Biden walking away with what everybody knew to be a sweetheart deal. 2 misdemeanor charges for failure to pay millions of dollars in taxes in a timely manner, and a pretrial diversion agreement for a gun charge, for lying on a gun background check form. And yet, what happened when Hunter Biden walked into that courtroom today? A judge asking a couple of basic questions, Judge Mary Ellen Noreika, decided that this case in no way can end in a plea agreement today. She asked whether or not future charges are still on the table for Hunter Biden, or would they be shut down by this plea arrangement? The prosecutors today acknowledging that the investigation continues to be open, which means that future charges have to be on the table. Hunter Biden's attorneys objected at that moment. Why did they object? Because they had an understanding that Hunter Biden was about to be granted blanket immunity. Where did they get that understanding from? How do Hunter Biden's lawyers arrive at that understanding? It's because of the federal government. It's because of Joe Biden's Justice Department. The whole thing's thrown into chaos because the Justice Department has an obligation here. Not to the American people, obviously. They're not interested in you. They have an obligation to defend Joe Biden. How do they do that? Keep the investigation open. If you can keep the Biden family investigation open, you can prevent Congress from getting access to information. You just keep telling them, well, it's currently under investigation. It's under active investigation. We can't share this information with you. And so from the moment the sweetheart deal was announced, when David Weiss announced it, he said it continues to be under investigation. Well, that's bizarre. Why would a defendant do that? Why would a defendant reach a deal with an agency that was promising more pain in the future? They wouldn't, unless they had the wink and nod agreement of blanket immunity. Yeah. We'll just say the investigation's still open. That helps us protect the stuff from becoming public. In the meantime, don't you worry. No more charges are coming for you. But you can't say that in a courtroom. And the judge asked the right questions today. And for now, this thing's on hold. You have got Hunter Biden pleading not guilty today. Pleading not guilty, at least for the moment. As the Justice Department, the corrupt Biden Justice Department, and Hunter Biden's lawyers get back together to try and piece some way through the puzzle that they've built for themselves. Will impeachment break through that? That's the question. Marjorie Taylor Green insists, yes, they'll have more power here. We'll see. I have a feeling the Supreme Court's going to have to get involved at some point. Coming up, we'll take your phone calls on a busy news day at 888-630-9625, and we'll share with you the results of a hearing on UFOs. Took place on Capitol Hill today. Does the government have ET? Some very interesting answers ahead. Good afternoon to you. 5:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. One of those bizarre news days where you get mountains of breaking news. You just saw Mitch McConnell earlier staggering in front of the microphone. He was speaking to the press, and all of a sudden he just went silent. He didn't have a word to say at that moment, and he stared at the press awkwardly for some time, and a lot of concern as he just froze up. This is the audio.
Bipartisan cooperation and a string of
Nothing. Finally, the Republicans behind him start gathering, and they say, hey, Senator John Barrasso, he's a physician. He said, hey, you doing okay? You want to stop your comments to the press? How about you go back to your office? And they took him back, and he finally showed up again at the lectern. He was asked by CNN's Manu Raju if this was the consequence of his concussion from earlier this year. And Mitch McConnell just said curtly that he's fine. I'm fine. And he moved on. But it was very strange. It was some 18, 19 seconds or so. I did see that the people over at the Babylon Bee have just put out a headline. Mitch McConnell observes a 19-second moment of silence for Ukraine. Too soon? Who knows anymore these days? But that's the Babylon Bee reacting very quickly. He did say he's fine. Let's admit here. He said, I'm fine. So the Babylon Bee jumping in. All right. Let me take some of your calls, and then I want to get to UFOs and extraterrestrials. There's a lot going on here. Phil is in Frederick on line 4. Phil, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello, Phil.
Hey, look, I just want to say I appreciate what this judge did, but I think she's going to be replaced. I think the FBI is going to attack her family, and I think the Democrats are going to force her to recuse herself.
Well, if the corruption is as deep as it seems, she has to be ready for the incoming for sure. This judge today in Delaware stopping this Hunter Biden plea deal in its tracks, saying, wait a second, are you investigating him more or not? And the Justice Department begrudgingly saying yes, and then Hunter's guys throwing the red flag saying, wait a second, I thought we were getting blanket immunity. And now it's in complete chaos, Phil. So you're saying the judge needs to keep an eye over her shoulder.
Oh, my gosh. You know it, Vince. You know that they're going to bring all of their dirty tricks to play. They're going to go all the way back into her past, and there'll be lies told about her. I can already hear them on The View talking about her, how she needs to be taken off the case. You know, I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Oh, boy, The View is a special place. It's a special, stupid place. Thank you, Phil. No, you're right about that. It's going to be interesting to hear Whoopi's analysis. And by interesting, I mean not interesting at all. She's going to just flatly say, why are they hassling Biden? Biden is such a nice guy. What are they doing this for? They're always making stuff up about the Bidens. Let me get Dennis in Annapolis in here, line 5. Dennis, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. I think that Merrick Garland is dragging his feet about the special counsel or special prosecutor. I don't know which one you call it.
Yes.
Because I think he's the linchpin, and I think once he does that, the whole thing's going to unravel, and the Biden crime family bribery scheme is going to come down like a house of cards.
Look, if he was honest, if he was a legit person, a legit attorney general, a special counsel would have been appointed a million years ago. They appointed one to take on the classified documents next to the Corvette in Delaware, right? So if that was the minimum threshold for it, we're way past that with the whole Biden family bribery scheme.
Well, I think they were just going through the motions with that one.
Yeah.
Just to say they did it. They just want to check off that box.
Yeah. Get ready for that to turn up nothing. Well, thank you, Dennis. It's an excellent point. Merrick Garland not appointing a special counsel in a case that so obviously would earn one if you were going to apply special counsels at all. Our friend Mike in Gainesville is on line 3. Mike, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, nothing compares to you, Coglianese. How about that?
Thank you. I don't even know what that means, but I feel like it's a compliment, so I'll take it.
It's a homage to Sinead O'Connor on top of your work. But
anyway,
anyway,
yes, that's right. That's right. I see. I'm with you. A little Sinead O'Connor send-off. I got
it. This whole ongoing investigation dodge that the FBI and the Department of Justice uses to make oversight impossible by Congress is just a policy by the Department of Justice and the FBI. Congress can certainly still compel them to come before Congress and testify in an executive session or before the Gang of Eight,
right,
and limit the number of people. And then it's upon Congress to keep the secrets that the Department of Justice and the FBI have about whatever ongoing investigation is taking place. And if the Congress people reveal information that jeopardizes the investigation that's ongoing forever, then they can be charged with interfering with a investigation. But
I guess so. I mean, I think the Privileges and Immunities Clause lets them share a whole bunch of stuff that they wouldn't be subjected to legal jeopardy for. But your point is well taken. This is supposed to be a policy, not a law, and yet in practice, you've got the Biden Justice Department saying, "Sorry, we're just not going to share any information with you because it's quote under investigation."
Right, but the Immunities Clause was written before we had C-SPAN. So the words that were spoken on the floor of the House or the Senate were contained within the House or the Senate.
Sure.
And mass media was going to be in the newspapers, not on the radio or television.
Yeah.
So broadcasting it out into the world is different from the immunities that was intended back.
That's true. Not if, but I guess as a technical matter, if you read it into the record first, then you're fine to say it on the radio. That's the point I'm making. It is a good point, Mike. You know, they're fighting tooth and nail. So I'm just hopeful that an impeachment inquiry will actually be the thing that'll shake a couple of apples loose here to get us to the truth. Thank you, Mike. Let me see here. I'm going to take John in Alexandria, line 2. John, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, longtime listener. Thanks for taking my call. I got a strategy to get a conviction on Hunter Biden.
Go for it.
And then from that, we think we can get a conviction on Biden and perhaps certainly an impeachment if we want one. And that is, remember when Joe Biden said that he would withhold $500 billion if he didn't get the DA for Ukraine fired?
Right.
That he'd make a phone call?
Yes.
Well, who do you think he was going to make a phone call to?
There's only one guy.
The guy that no one's talking about, the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
the guy who just killed his chef in
the
Martha's Vineyard. I'm just kidding. I don't know.
Yeah,
that was just a joke. I don't know that he did that. I'm just saying there are rumors. I've heard rumors. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
But that has nothing to do with it, obviously. But
John, I like John distancing himself from that. But no, you're right. Barack Obama. That's the man you're talking about.
Yeah. So I'd say let's start, putting pressure on everybody involved, and let's see what happens from that. Let's see if who in the domino effect actually gets convicted.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no,
yeah,
yeah, and I think if I'm confident, in fact, based on all of the contemporaneous reporting at the time and beyond, Obama's always had a problem with Biden because I think you can kind of watch it, John. You kind of know, like he knows that Biden has been doing this for years, this corruption scheme, and it's been driving Obama crazy because he's like, this guy, he's being sloppy, and we're gonna get caught because of his sloppiness. And if you go back a couple of years now. The Wall Street Journal had a piece that talked about how the Obama people were constantly freaking out about these side deals that the Biden family were cooking up because their view was this is going to get us into trouble. The Bidens are going to get us into trouble. And Obama's position on Biden was pretty famously that he didn't want him to be president of the United States. He kept telling him, "You don't have to do this, Joe." That's the phrase. You don't have to do this, Joe. And yet here we are. So maybe it is time to put the squeeze on Obama and go, look, brother, there could be consequences coming for you. It's time to cough up what you know.
If Hunter's guilty, Joe's involved and implicated, and Obama's involved and he's implicated.
Yeah. All right, John, thank you. It's a smart call. Really appreciate that.
Thanks,
Let me, I want to get to this hearing on UFOs today real quick. I've got, the Oversight Committee finally was able to get a hearing going on these unidentified aerial phenomena. They want to call them UAPs these days, but Americans understand the phrase UFOs, unidentified flying objects, and that's what we've all referred to from the time we were children. New York Post headline today: ex-Intel official claims feds absolutely have UFOs, materials of non-human origin during bombshell hearing. Uh-oh. A former Air Force officer and intelligence officer told Congress today that he believes the government is hiding captured UFOs and claimed he could not reveal whether anyone was murdered to keep the secret contained. David Grush is a former National Reconnaissance Officer representative for the Pentagon's UAP task force, and he made the startling remarks during a bombshell House Oversight Subcommittee hearing on UAP, which is Pentagon jargon for UFOs. Asked whether the government has possession of such vehicles, Grush replied, absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years and where I know the exact locations the UFOs are kept, he said, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General. Well, that's wild. I do have some of the audio from the hearing today. Let's see if I can scroll on over to it. This is David Grush, the man you just heard about, testifying to Congress about UFOs, and here it is.
So there has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans.
I can't get into the specifics in an open environment, but at least the activity that I personally witnessed, and I have to be very careful here because they tell you never to acknowledge tradecraft, right? So what I personally witnessed myself and my wife was very disturbing.
Okay.
Okay, so he's doing this under oath, remember. You don't lie to Congress or else there are consequences, unless you're a cabinet official for Joe Biden. But beyond that, there are consequences for the rest of us to lie to Congress. So here you have David Grush saying, it's been some very disturbing stuff, including what I've witnessed. Congressman Tim Burchett from Tennessee, who's been trying to dig into this, had some questions.
Do you have any personal knowledge of people who have been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal these extraterrestrial technology?
The question essentially is that has anybody been murdered? Has anybody been murdered or hurt or anything in an effort for the government to cover up the existence of its findings?
Yes.
Okay, one more time, just so you hear that full one.
Do you have any personal knowledge of people who have been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal these extraterrestrial technology?
Yes. Personally.
Have anyone been murdered that you would that you know of or have heard of, I guess?
I have to be careful asking that question. I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities.
What? So has anyone been murdered for trying to share this information? He says, I've got to be careful with how I answer that question. Not exactly reassuring. Congressman Tim Burchett continues.
How do you know that these were not our aircraft?
Some of the behaviors that we saw in a working area, we would see these objects being at 0.0 Mach, that's zero airspeed, over certain pieces of the ground. So what that means, just like a river, if you throw a bobber in, it's going to float downstream. These objects were staying completely stationary in Category 4 hurricane winds. These same objects would then accelerate to supersonic speeds, 1.1, 1.2 Mach, and they would do so in very erratic and quick behaviors that I don't have an explanation for.
Sure would be good to get one. Congresswoman Nancy Mace then asks one of the obvious questions here. Does the government have any of the evidence of this?
If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries. Yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
Do we have the bodies from the craft? David Grush says, we have the biologics. They were non-human. What? It kind of seems like a big deal. No, maybe? Little thing? I don't know. Seems like a big deal. Ryan Graves, a former Navy fighter pilot, also testifying today about what people have been seeing and the similarities between all of their claims.
During a training mission in Warning Area Whiskey 72, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, two F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere.
And by the way, he reiterated in his testimony, a black cube or a dark gray cube inside of a clear sphere has been a common description among military pilots who have seen these things with some frequency.
The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft and was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter. The mission commander terminated the flight immediately and returned to base. Our squadron submitted a safety report, but there was no official acknowledgement of the incident and no further mechanism to report the sightings. Soon, these encounters became so frequent that aircrew would discuss the risk of UAP as part of their regular pre-flight briefs.
Regular pre-flight briefs. The military guys would constantly be talking about they were encountering objects of unknown origin flying in very bizarre patterns while they were up doing their missions. Last one for you. This is back to David Grush for a moment, under questioning from Democrat Congressman Robert Garcia.
Mr. Grush, finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
I know the exact locations, he says. And some of the other witnesses were describing, having seen it firsthand, some of the way that these objects move through the air. They change direction in a way that human physics wouldn't allow, a human craft wouldn't allow, unmanned or otherwise. Some of the testimony today included that the G-forces required in order to change directions at the speed these vehicles were going would kill any human inside. That would not be the kind of thing that a human could endure. Kind of fascinating today to see this testimony before Congress and some of these guys just showing up there under oath saying, here's what I've seen. And a couple of the witnesses were saying that they've been retaliated against by the government, and they know plenty of others. And that's why there's been so much secrecy around these issues, because the government has, on a frequent basis, apparently, retaliated against people who come out and tell the truth about what they've seen. Minority leader in the Senate, it just stops talking for 17 seconds, staring at a camera blankly. We don't know what's going on with his health. Aliens exist. Hunter Biden's plea deal just fell apart. Speaker Kevin McCarthy is now going to launch impeachment. If you were looking for a slow news day, sorry. The great one, Mark Levin, takes things from here. Don't miss that here on WMAL.